Hey guys, Modsy here, back with another video, and what you are seeing in front of you here is the remains of my 1999 retro build that I did very recently. And I've been using this for a little while now, and found that while I originally built this system to be cover two eras of gaming, sort of like the early DOS stuff, like Duke Nukem 2 and things like that, all the way up through to sort of your 1999 games and even 2000 games. Unfortunately, I found myself playing the latter end of the year, that sort of time span games, a lot more than the early ones. And unfortunately, that 533 megahertz Pentium 2 based Celeron really didn't cut it anymore. The video card was being bottlenecked, and really it was just a bit of a drag. The hard drives, the two 30 gig quantum fireball drives I've got here, were really nice. The cooling and stuff was really good. The Sound Blaster 16 ran like a champ. 256 meg of SD RAM. This is PC 66, which is the maximum this board can actually take. This was a really nice build. This is the Voodoo 3 PCI 2000, by the way. And that's a really nice card, and it was pretty much maxing out this platform in terms of its capabilities. But it didn't deliver the CPU performance in the end for the higher end, like latter end, like 2000, 2001 games that I found myself wanting to play. So, instead, I went and had a bit of a shopping spree on eBay and bought a few new parts. Alright guys, so this is the new parts, almost all of them anyway. I've actually got a couple more that I'll talk about in a minute. So what have we got? Well, there's a few obviously outliers that you can kind of see very clearly of what they are. But this here is a really nice Epox motherboard. This is a really nice board by Epox. I'll put the exact model number for this one on screen, because I don't remember off the top of my head while I'm holding the camera here at the moment. But this is a really nice. Now this board was in really good condition when I got it. It actually come all the way from Europe, so really nice. Oh my god, camera, what are you doing to me? There we go. Really nice board. Very funnily nicknamed because of this very gigantic capacitor up here next to the CPU. When I first posted a couple of photos of this on Discord, it was nicknamed the Capzilla motherboard because of the gigantic capacitor that's up here, which is rather odd. This is sort of typical of something you might see in a power supply. This is like your normal sized capacitors for VRM and stuff, but that one's kind of funny, which is kind of stood out a bit. But really nice motherboard, actually. I have already had a bit of a chance. I wanted to test it to make sure it was all okay and everything was working, and that's all good, which is good. The other very glaring, obvious thing you can see sitting in the middle here is, well, that's my pair of Voodoo 2s. Now, of course, I do have the two of them here, as you can see. Now, if you remember correctly, in the last Retro 99 build that I did, how I wanted to originally use these, but unfortunately one of these is dead. Some of the traces along just here are actually dead, and they no longer, the card just no longer functions, unfortunately. I've tried to repair it with a little magnifying glass and a very fine pin, like a needle, to try and fix it, but it requires a little bit more expertise and repair capabilities than what I can do here. So, thing is that of course with this board having a nice AGP port, I wanted to use, I obviously didn't want to keep using the Voodoo 3 because I wanted to use that card there, which I'll come on to in a minute, but I wanted to also keep the capacity to switch over and use Glide API for some of the games that run best on Glide, of course. So, obviously, couldn't do with just one of these, considering only one of them works. So, I picked up a third one. Now, one thing you might notice very glaringly here is the fact that these are mismatched pairs. And traditionally, mismatched pairs of Voodoo 2s, especially if they have different BIOSes, won't actually work in SLI together very well. You'll have a lot of driver crashes, some games just blatantly won't work, and you can have a lot of issues with it. Thankfully, the community, beyond the end of official support for drivers, the 3DFX fan base kept making really nice drivers, and I believe that on both Phil's Computer Lab, and I think on the 3DFX Zone fan website as well, you can get the 4.6 fast Voodoo, I think they're called. I'll put the proper name of it up here somewhere. Those drivers support mismatched cards, and I have had no problem running these as a mismatched pair in SLI, and they work awesomely, which is really, really good. So I'm so happy that I managed to get these two working. I knew I was going to have a problem. I was trying to track down another identical card like this on eBay, but unfortunately the couple that were on eBay were a little bit too expensive, so I ended up going for this one, which was about $30 or $40 cheaper than what the average price of a Voodoo 2 seems to go for at the moment on eBay. So quite nice pricing for that. Well, let's get on to the main video card there, the AGP one sitting at the back down here. This is, zoom in, this is a Geforce 256 SDR 32 meg. I thought this was the perfect pairing AGP card to go along with this era of system. It pairs really nicely with the Voodoos. It offers obviously a little bit more performance than what these two cards offer in SLI, which is really good for those games that came out in like 2000 and 2001 that sort of started to drop glide support in more favor for just direct 3D support. That card really shines, and this combo works so well together, especially with the processors that I have in here. So you might have noticed very briefly or very quickly the 3 CPUs that I've got sitting here. These are, of course, 3 Coppermine CPUs. We've got this one here, which is a 700 MHz Pentium 3. We've got this one here, which is a 800 MHz Celeron, which obviously has half the cache. Still, these are all 133 MHz frontside bus CPUs, which is nice. And then we've got a 1 gig Pentium 3 here at the end, which is obviously probably one of the most popular retro CPUs in existence these days. If you want to build a really fast Windows 98 PC and you don't want to spend a huge amount of money on a CPU, you can pick these things up for like $5 on eBay. There's so many of them everywhere. Now this one actually, one awesome feature about this motherboard is it has some really nice overclocking tools in it. It's not extensively like what we're used to on motherboards these days, but it has overclocking potential on it, which is really nice. And all of these CPUs overclock between 100 and 200 megahertz, which is quite nice. So this one, which is a 1000 megahertz or 1 gig Pentium 3, this will actually run at 1245 megahertz. So 1.245 gigahertz, which is really nice. Then we're going to come on to the expansion cards. Going to switch over from the Sound Blaster 16 over to the Sound Blaster Live, the original Sound Blaster Live. So before the 5.1 and the ones with the funky coloured ports and stuff on them. This one's got some nice gold contacts and stuff. This is a really nice card. Handles DOS games and like MIDI emulation and all that sort of stuff really, really well. I haven't had any like note hanging or any issues like that with this card for older games at all, which is really nice. And it's a really nice all-round card, very compatible. So driver-wise, it didn't have an issue. In fact, Windows 98 picked it up straight away from a fresh install of Windows, which was rather nice. Then we have a 10100 network card, which is something new that I'm adding into this ecosystem of a build, because I do have my little switch over here that I like to hook up to all of my retro PCs, so I can do things like transfer files and stuff across much easier for games and things like that. So I'm going to be tooling around with getting this thing hooked up onto my home network here as well. But that'll come in a later video. That's not something I'm going to work on straight away now. So the other thing, I suppose I should get back to the CPUs and actually let you know exactly what CPU I'm going to be using. My apologies. So I'm not actually going to be using any of these CPUs. The CPU I'm going to be using is this one here. Now, let me
just get that so it's in focus for you guys a little bit better. Come on. Hey, camera, what are you doing to me? You had it in. You know what?
There we go. So, this might look like to you... There we go. This might look like to you a Tualatin Pentium 3. However, it is not actually a Tualatin Pentium 3. This is, in fact, still a 1 gigahertz Pentium 3 that actually has a heat spreader on it, which it's identical to this little dude down here. Really nice. Same voltage, same everything. But it has this really nice heat spreader on it. So this is the CPU I'm going to be using, and the reason for that is this cooler specifically has a much looser retention bracket than what the other one is that fits on this. And when I was using these CPUs, that one is really tight, and it wouldn't fit next to the capacitors and stuff that are on. Sorry, there we go. It wouldn't fit on the capacitors and stuff with this on there. It was just too tight. That one's a little bit looser, and it will fit with the height, extra height that the IHS here actually adds to it. So that's what I'm going to be going with. And I've already tested this as well, and this overclocks just as nicely as this one. So this will actually do 1245 megahertz as well. Now that is unfortunately the maximum limit that this board can do, because you can increase the frontside bus up to 166 megahertz, which spits out 1245 for the CPU. So that's what I'm going to be going with. So one part you might notice that's not here at the moment on the table is the memory that I'm going to be using with this build. So I've actually ordered 3 sticks of RAM from the particular company, which I'll show you in a minute. And I've got 228 meg sticks and a 256 meg stick coming, so I'll have 512 meg in total, which is the maximum capacity that this board can handle. I had to find very specific types of RAM to have that capacity, because this board's a little bit finicky with like double-sided sticks of RAM in the 3rd slot. So I had to find a 256 meg stick that is single-sided that can actually put into there to give me the full 512. But I'm also getting some very special heat spreaders because I'm going to be overclocking the memory as well. I wanted to make sure that the RAM was going to be cooled really nicely. So I've got some really nice heat spreaders that I'm going to be putting on the RAM to put on there as well, which I'll show in the next video when they arrive. But I wanted to mention about the RAM because you see this company here, ATEC. I buy all of my SD RAM off of eBay. These guys do a huge amount of brand new sticks of memory on eBay, and they can cater for anything from 33 megahertz all the way up to 133 megahertz RAM of all different capacity, including 512 meg sticks. This RAM is you can have the option of having double-sided like what this one is. You can get single-sided. They do a lot of different versions, and the RAM is really good. I've been overclocking with this. It's been very stable. I haven't had any issues. I've got like 6 sticks of this stuff already from these guys, and it is really nice. So if you are in the market and you want some brand new RAM, you don't want to risk getting some old SD RAM that's dead, this stuff's really cheap. Like this is 128 meg of PC66, and this was like $6 on eBay. So this stuff is really cheap plus shipping. So it's competitive against the used stuff, and it's brand new. The other final thing, of course, we are going to mention is the storage for this system. Now, so I went on eBay and picked up this really nice Samsung SpinPoint 4, or 04 or whatever it's called, sorry. But it is a 40 gig, 72 RPM, 2 meg cache PATA drive, so it is an IDE drive. But this is not the only drive that I'm going to have in this system. This will be the boot drive, so this will be the primary drive. In fact, Windows 98 is already installed, and all the games and a lot of stuff is already on this, on the 30 gig partition. But when we're getting into the era of early 2000s games, of course, we're starting to run into games that had DRM and issues like that, and of course, you needed to use, backup copies of CDs to run on a virtual drive. And of course, you need to have those images or those ISOs stored somewhere, and preferably somewhere fast, so that you had some good speed when loading those image drives. That's where the other really cool part of this build is going to come into play, because I'm going to be using this drive here as my image and ISO storage drive. So this, as you can probably tell, is a Western Digital Raptor drive. This is one of the originals. It's the 36 gig, which you can see there. But of course, this is a SATA hard drive. So that means, obviously, this is not a SATA compatible motherboard. Well, natively anyway. So I have actually ordered a Promise SATA 150 and ATA 133. It's like a hybrid SATA, like a PCI RAID controller that essentially has 2 SATA 150 ports plus an IDE 133 port on it that is compatible with Windows 98 and is also compatible with these drives. Now, I originally, very first, I was thinking about having this as the OS drive, and this is the storage drive, but apparently the Promise RAID controller can have some issues where it can just spontaneously stop working as a boot drive. Like it'll stop detecting something like in the boot sequence, and sometimes it can play up. So the seller that I bought the RAID controller off of, I haven't got it yet, it's in transit at the moment, said that he recommends if this is the setup I'm going to go with, the speed difference between these two is minuscule. This is 133, this is 150. This will be slightly faster, but the important thing for me in terms of speed is actually the loading of the ISOs and the games and all that sort of stuff. So that's why I thought this would be more suited, where it's not a primary drive, it's not a boot drive, and it can just always work as that backup sort of storage drive. It's a fast storage drive, which is really nice. And then this will remain being the primary one. So that's what I'm doing with the storage for this system, which I think is kind of unique. I don't know very many people that actually use good old the Raptor drives for Windows 98. I know a few people do, but I had this one laying around. I've had this one for a little bit now, and I wanted to use it in a system that wasn't something, you know, from when it was brand new. I wanted to use this in Windows 98 and have it play around with it, and I think it's going to fit really well into this. Alright guys, let's get to building. Alright guys, so it is all put together. Of course, I'm missing the RAID card that will eventually go down here. That'll go up to the Raptor drive that's just in here. So obviously the Raptor drive is not connected yet. Obviously the RAM, that still has to be changed to the new sticks of RAM that I'm going to be getting. And other than that, everything else is in. So, yeah, let's fire it up and see how we go. Right, so I'm going to jump into the BIOS, and I think the overclock is already set. So at the moment the RAM that's in there is only 133, and it doesn't really like being overclocked more than that. So this is the overclocking options that we've got here. What I'll just do is, now you guys can see that hopefully a bit better. So we've got system memory frequency, auto detect dim PCI, we've got that enabled, yes. And this is the overclocking stuff here. So you can't, you can go higher, but it doesn't work on all CPUs, and unfortunately the two 1 gig ones are locked at 7.5, can't change it. But what you can change is this. So by default, on default this is just default, but normally it's like 133, etc. We can go all the way to the maximum, which is the end, which is 166. Da-da-da. and escape. Also, temperatures 30 degrees, 33 degrees. Hit OK, let's restart. Alright guys, so here we are on the desktop, and before I jump in and do some of the normal games and stuff, I wanted to play a game that is one of my favourite games from the early 2000s, and that is Unreal Tournament 2003. This is actually going to really stretch the Geforce 256 and this CPU to its limits, so let's jump in and fire this up. Now the reason that I'm firing this up first is this isn't a game that I'm normally going to be playing on this system. This is actually one of the games I play on my Pentium 4 based system. Let's just skip past all that. And the reason that I'm showing you this game on this system is, this game requires very specific drivers to run that are like 23.11, and those drivers break a lot of the older games on the Geforce 256. So after I've done showing you just how good this game can run on this system, I've actually got to swap the drivers back to, I think it's 8.05 or 8.06, and then those drivers work really, really well with like the late 90s and like 2000, 2001 games. They're the best drivers for those games. But this is a driver that you need to use for this. This is like the oldest driver that this game allows you to run, and run it pretty decently. So let's get out of instant action first, actually, so what I'm doing is running it at 1024 by 768, 16-bit color. Details, we've actually got texture detail on normal, believe it or not, which is really good. World detail also on normal, which is the lowest. Everything else on absolutely low, except for trilinear filtering. In fact, I might actually turn that off. I don't really need it on anyway. Oh, I do need a name. There we go. So, instant action, let's jump in, and yeah, it's one of my favourite maps, Face. There we go. A good old classic. Face. I love the Egyptian stuff in this game. So you can see I have got fraps running in the corner, so you can actually see the frame rate. So it's not obviously groundbreakingly fast, but obviously this game was designed for like minimum spec Geforce 2, bare minimum spec, and like Geforce 3, Geforce 4. Like this game was designed for Geforce 4 era cards. So to be able to run this game on a Geforce 256 is actually kind of funny. So we are getting like between 20 and 30 FPS, but it is actually playable. So it's a little bit laggy in some places, but again, we are running normal details and stuff, so we will get between like 30 and 40 here. So of course we're inside at the moment. You can see the nice textures, reflection, everything. Pew pew pew. Okay. That's the inside over and done with, and then we jump to the outside, and we're still getting around 20 to 30 FPS, which is kind of nice. And I've actually disabled. We're still getting some of the reflections and stuff, which is kind of cool. Not the best, but so there you go. That's 20 to 25 FPS when you're looking up at the big structures and stuff. So if you wanted a slightly bit more consistency, consistent frame rate, you could probably drop it down to 800 by 600. But I kind of wanted to just sort of really push this to show you just how capable even an SDR Geforce 256 is. You know, this is not the most demanding game to run, but you know, this is definitely a game that was not designed to be run on a Geforce 256. So yeah, when push comes to shove, this is a game you can actually play. Oh, where are you? Oh, there you are. Oh. Oh, wow. How did I not realise that their flag was sitting there? Awesome work, team. Awesome work. Alright, so we've got the 8.02 drivers installed, and I'm going to run in now and play some jump in, there we go. I'm going to jump in and play some Colin Mcrae Rally 2. This is one of my favourite old rally games from the early 2000s. Played quite a bit of this back in the day, so this should be a fun one to jump in and sort of really show off the accurate performance of a Geforce 256 in the games that were around when it was one of the dominating cards, I guess you can say. Now this game does run on both. It can run on both the two Voodoo 2s and of course the Geforce 256. But I thought I'd go through and show you the Geforce 256 first. You know what, let's go Australia. There we go. Cloudy, rainy. Let's do rainy. There we go. That'll stress the system out a little bit. Setup, blah, 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 blah. Let's just keep it normal. Let's just hit race. So again, you can see the frame rate in the top corner there. So you can see the game runs really smooth. This is a game designed to really have good performance with the early Geforce cards, and you can probably see the highlight, like the light. There's obviously no actual light ray, vertex ray, or anything like that. You can clearly see the headlights showing on the ground as I'm driving around. Oh, I was trying to dodge that. My rally skills are not too good while I'm talking, so I would probably be a pretty crappy rally driver, I reckon. Okay, there we go. Handbrake turn, yay, and almost slide off the road. Let's see what the rain looks like in cockpit view. Whoa, there we go. No. I'm not a fan of... Whoa, there's a gate. Yep. You can see that one coming a mile away. One really cool thing about this game as well is the dirt and stuff that you end up getting on your car when it's raining, and like the mud and stuff, which is kind of cool. Took that one a little bit wide there, son. That's just a bit too wide. Rally skills left to be desired. You can see like the lights have, like the rear tail lights have a nice, whoa, that's high. The rear tail lights have a nice glow to them, and the headlights glow and they knock out. And I want to see actually if I can crash. I want to break the glass. Okay, so this is perfect. Hairpin. There we go. No, yep, so I broke one of the tail lights at the back there. You can see the headlights sort of glowing around as you drive around. Although I think I've busted them now. I might have actually busted them. But this game runs so nice. It's like, this is maximum detail, highest settings, 1024 by 768. We're getting like 30, 40, up to 50 FPS when it's not raining. In the snow, I think it sits at between like 50 and 60, because obviously it's like white out, so there's not really a huge amount of like color happening. There's not a huge amount of really much of anything happening. So in the snow, it runs even faster, but in the rain, when it's mud and you've got all the extra textures on here, and you've got lights, so it's a little bit dark, this is kind of like the worst case scenario for this game. A little bit deformed there. Anyway, so that's that game. Alright guys, so let's jump in and play a little bit of Quake 2 with the Voodoo cards. So we are running at 1024 by 768 with the 3DFX OpenGL thing turned on. Every time you exit out it has to reload, even though I didn't change anything. Anyway. Jump, and straight into a loading screen. Typical. So we are getting quite a decent frame rate actually. And blow up. So as you can see here, I'm going to just go back to the flare gun. You can see just what things look like with the Voodoo 2s in SLI. Now if we jump across to the Geforce 256 and see what that looks like, you can see things are a little bit darker. Frame rate's about 20 to 30 FPS faster. Everything looks a little bit smoother. To be honest, this looks better on the Geforce 256 than it does on the Voodoo 2s. This definitely looks like it's like much higher fidelity, much better looking OpenGL, but I want to test the Voodoo 2s out. So let's switch back to Voodoo 2s. And again, 1024 by 768 and everything, so it's running quite nice. Let's jump in and we're going to go run through a secret level. Da, 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 da. There we go. Oh my god, oh my god. Mouse, what are you doing to me? There we go. Well, as you guys can see, the game is actually running quite nicely. I'm actually going to jump out here because I'm going to go down here, around here, and up here. Did that open up? Yeah, okay. Secret within a secret. That's definitely secretception. Die please, die please. Thank you, there we go. Almost missed it. There we go. So frame rate wise, this is running at I want to say around 60 to 70 FPS, which is quite nice for this resolution. There is a little bit of street, like you can probably see that a little bit. Maybe not. Maybe the camera's not going to pick it up too well. What do you do? You shoot me from back there? Okay. Oh my god. Couldn't hit that. Red key. Thank you. Good old shotgun. Alright, thank you. Another secret within a secret. Oh, as if it didn't fall off the edge. Thank you. Ah, where are we? Oh my god. I can't aim for shit. Good old super shotgun. Done. Go away. And I know there's some more secrets and bits and pieces to find in this level, but the game is running really well, as you can see. Alright guys, so one of the other games that I wanted to test out on the other machine that just didn't want to run properly, it had a few issues with the CPU, is Need for Speed 5 Porsche Unleashed. Now this is running on the two Voodoo 2s in SLI. However, please note that it's not running at the 1024x768. When you switch it over to glide to 3DFX mode, it doesn't allow you to run the higher resolution, whereas if I was to select the Geforce 256, that does allow you to go to higher resolution. So unfortunately, I'm not going to fiddle. I haven't been able to fiddle around with it. I don't know how to fiddle around with it to change to get it to go higher, but we're just going to run it 800x600. Everything's except for widescreen, that's turned off. Car detail is high. Everything is high, very high, very high. Let's go advanced. We've got projected. Projected seems to run and look a little bit nicer on the Voodoo cards, whereas the Vertex one looks a little bit nicer on the Geforce 256. Lens flare on, sky rendering on high, and everything else is good. So we're going to go back. Let's jump in and we're just going to have a quick race. Let's select Porsche. Let's just go blue and race. I don't think I picked the map, but it doesn't really matter. So the one thing that's not running right now is, of course, Fraps. Fraps doesn't run with all the applications with the glide wrapper and all that kind of stuff. So let's change to a view that actually works. And of course, I'm in manual. So let's change it so I can actually see it. There we go. So frame rate wise, the camera is going to be recording at 30 FPS, so apologies for that. But we are actually, slide, I forgot the physics in this game are a little bit crazy compared to 3 and 4. Let's actually change to that view. So yeah, frame rate wise, this is running at, I would say, between, it feels like it's running between sort of 40, 50 to 60. It seems when there's a lot of cars in front of you, it's more like 30 to 40. But as soon as you sort of get out in front and you're in the lead, that then dips down to, so that then goes back up to like 50 to 60, because obviously, oh god, I really don't like the physics of this game. They're very balloony, like as if you're, like the car's like very wobbly and it's a bit horrible. 3 and 4 definitely had decent physics. I think 2 wasn't too bad as well. 1 was very weird for me, because I'm so used to like 3 and 4's physics. Yeah, I mean, this game's it's running quite nicely. It's running quite smooth. Quite nice, actually, I have to admit. 800x600 on this 19-inch monitor is not the best to look at. So you definitely need like a smaller monitor to run these smaller resolutions to actually make them still look good. But again, the game's running. Everything looks quite good. Alright, so I'm going to load up 3D Mark 99. And let's make sure this is actually in focus there for you and you guys can actually see it running there. I don't have the Pro version of this unlocked, so I don't know why it did that. That's really weird. So again, Geforce 256, so it's 800 by 600, 16-bit, and it is Pentium 3, blah blah blah. So yeah, let's just run and see how she goes. Let's get rid of that. Now do note I have turned off, oops, bumped the camera. I have turned off VSync, as you can see, it's unlimited, which is good. And I think, I'm going to guess, no, I have actually already run this before with the other CPU. I haven't actually run this yet with this new CPU. Even though they're technically identical, you never know exactly what they're going to do, what they're going to look like. So this is, let's say 8,000 maybe, and let's say 8,000 score with, let's say 17,600 on the CPU maybe. The CPU score, I'll have to check. I'm just sort of guessing because I roughly know what the other one got when it was overclocked the same as this. So I'm guessing they should be the same unless something really dramatic makes it run differently, I guess. So let's see what we're going to get. So I'm going to fast forward until the end, guys, and hopefully we should see the results at the end. Wow, okay, so as you can see there, we ended up with a score of 8,203 and a CPU score of 17,495, which is pretty much bang on to what I was expecting it to be. So while this is, let me just close, no, don't save, programs, programs, thank you, CPU Z, CPU Z, CPU whatever, 1245, oh god, you really can't see that, can you? Holy crap, there you go. There you go, 1245 megahertz, yeah, running quite smoothly, temperature-wise. So we've just run a benchmark. What I might just do, just to show you temperature, let me just restart it. And I'm going to jump straight into BIOS because, load up. So obviously the memory might be holding us back a little bit there. So let's jump over to PC Health. And as you can see, 35, it's just gone down to 34. So, I mean, this thing is running like less than 40 degrees while it's overclocked really nicely. So, cannot complain. That's actually running really well. The one thing that I would like to note here, and this is where it is really important to have a very good power supply with the 5-volt rail. Have a look at the voltage on the 5-volt rail. It's at 4.59, which is probably on the limit of being an issue. So, be very careful with what power supply you're using when overclocking, especially when you don't have any kind of like 4-pin like you have with Pentium 4 and Athlons. You need a power supply with good amperage on the 5-volt rail. The power supply that I'm using, which is the Thermaltake 650 watt, is probably on the limit. I think it has like an 18 amp rail for 5-volt, which is definitely not quite enough. And I think wattage wise, it's not as high as what it really should be either. So please be careful. I'm actually going to be swapping this power supply out in the future for a better one that does have better amperage for long-term use, but I have been keeping an eye on it, and nothing seems to be an issue so far. So I just have to make sure it's okay and make sure I'm not going to kill the power supply. So yeah, so that's everything. Thank you very much, guys, for watching, and I will catch you in the next one. Bye for now.